I'd now like to invite Supervisor Farrell up to the...
Good afternoon, Commissioners. President Fong, thank you for having me here today. For a second there, I thought Supervisor Campos was looking for Airbnb employees. I thought he was pointing at me. Proud to be representing District 2 on the Board of Supervisors and to come forward to talk about the amendments that Mayor Lee and I have proposed. You know, last year our Board of Supervisors came together with input from our Planning Commission, and I want to thank planning staff, everyone else from our city family that was involved last year and this year as well in looking at these issues to pass a regulatory framework for short-term rentals in our city. A topic we all know is extremely complicated with 1,000 different points of view, but ultimately we derived a framework that was, in my opinion, a starting point. Since that time, our city departments, as well as many of those interested on this topic, many of those outside of City Hall, have continued to look at the issue in terms of its legislation, its impacts, and its logistics. From my perspective, I believe we should fully support home sharing here in San Francisco, but in a way that does three things in particular. Number one, to create a law that is without a doubt enforceable. Number two, to create a law that protects affordable housing in our city. And number three, to create a law that streamlines the registration process and does not create additional bureaucratic red tape for those that want to share their homes in our city. Given our city's current housing crisis, we must ensure and we must protect our city from turning into a city of solely owned short-term rentals and strike the balance necessary to do so so that residents can continue to live and thrive in our city, but also have the ability to make ends meet. With all eyes on San Francisco and how our city continues to approach regulating short-term rentals, it is extremely important, in my opinion, to strengthen and streamline our current framework and processes. And I do believe that Mayor Lee's and I's proposal does exactly that. And I'm going to be very brief in my comments about exactly what those proposals are and the details. They contain three main components. First of all, we have proposed a 120-day hard cap on the number of days a year that hosts can use as short-term rentals. By treating all short-term rental hosts equally, by striking out the difference between hosted and unhosted days. And I know my good colleague, Supervisor Campos, and good friend, who we happen to disagree with on a number of policy points on this issue, we both have listened to our planning department, and that was the number one thing we heard back from our staff, was that if we're going to create an enforceable law, the distinction between hosted and unhosted days and common sense would dictate that's simply not going to be enforceable. We have corrected that. And even if companies oppose a hard cap, I do believe it is the reasonable thing to do. Second of all, we have created an Office of Short-Term Rental Administration and Enforcement that is going to be staffed by our Planning Department, our Department of Building Inspection, and our Treasurer and Tax Collector's Office. And in speaking with Mayor Lee over time about this topic both last year and this year, enforceability continued to be a main priority of his. And by creating a separate office, I think it demonstrates not only his commitment, but the commitment of all of our city and all of our departments to making sure that this law is passed that is enforceable, but that we are also adequately staffed to make sure that our departments are enforcing the law in fact. And I will also say that I have had great discussions. We have had great discussions over the last few weeks, just this week in my office, with the Planning Department, together with the Department of Building Inspection, together with the Treasurer and Tax Collector's Office, to talk about how we're going to not only set up the law to streamline the process for home sharers, but also create a much more enforceable department. And there is a true dedication to that, and I want to thank all of the departments for their work already in coalescing around this issue. And thirdly, in addition to the city's current private right of action that will allow property owners and adjacent neighbors within 100 feet to be able to take use of the private right of action. That was a change from our prior legislation. Again, our goal with these amendments, and I'll say it again and again, is to protect our housing stock, to streamline the short-term rental host registration process, and clarify elements of the law to make sure it's fully enforceable. I do want to thank the planning staff for recommending these three main proposals and that Mayor Lee and I have come forward with. as well as for their additional recommendations. I do want to take a moment to focus on one of the recommendations that on its face seems very easy to agree with conceptually, but one that I feel would have unintended consequences. And it's the recommendations that would prohibit any hosting platform for listing any unit unless they had the registration number with it. I do think that if we're serious about addressing short-term rentals and the entirety of the issues that it brings, that this recommendation should not stand. To be clear, this recommendation only targets one company, Airbnb. And I understand in the past and even today that they are an easy target. But if you look at the number of listings, Airbnb's number of listings in San Francisco has gone down while all of the other home sharing platforms have gone up. And it has never been talked about or discussed that they should comply with a similar type of law. And from my perspective as a city, we want to address the entirety of the issue, not simply focus or scapegoat one company. I think there are serious questions whether these other platforms or individuals that even run their own sites would ever be able to comply with this type of requirement. How would we ever be able to enforce that? I have questions about the implications it would have if the city made any mistake in any way. And I also do believe it would have the unintended consequence, as we've quite frankly seen over the last 6 to 9 months, of pushing people that are doing home sharing in San Francisco off of a platform like Airbnb onto other platforms that we're not even talking about regulating right now. It's a different approach, but I do believe one of the goals that we must have as a city is to incentivize people to register with us so that we are able to track and we are able to enforce the law, so that the bad actors that no one wants to see are able to be enforced against. I believe we risk actually making the city's job in regard to enforcement much more difficult if this specific recommendation is approved. Commissioners, I want to thank you for your time today. I know you've heard a lot. I know you have a lot of public commenters behind us, so I'll cut my comments there. But I do want to thank your staff and all of the other departments, in particular DBI and our treasurer tax collectors, who we've come together already to discuss if our amendments pass the implementation of this so we can start enforcing right away, and certainly thank the mayor for his efforts and his continued commitment to this issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you.